Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Great to be back for this Thursday episode. Final one of the week for us. And rounding out a great week of expert investors. We've covered some interesting thematics. We've heard about a number of specific companies. And we're going to close it out by talking about the smaller end of town.
That's it, and we've got an expert to help us do it. It is our pleasure to welcome Callum Burns to the studio. Callum, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon.
So Callum is the Managing Director and Portfolio Manager at ICE Investors, and today we're going to be unpacking all things small caps. So Callum, let's start at the top. Are you able to walk us through your investment philosophy and sort of what are some of the key characteristics that you look for that make up that philosophy?
Certainly, what we're looking for are superior businesses. So what we do for every company that we look to invest in, we look for companies that first of all have assets that are difficult to replicate. Secondly, we look to see those assets are managed, very cleanly and very tightly, so that makes the customer sticky. And then the third thing is we look to have companies that are appropriately priced, so that we can get a really good return for investors. But again, we're focused over the long term, over a 7-year horizon.
So Callum, looking at your website, you speak about looking in the safe end of small caps or investing in the safe end of small caps. Can you break it down for us? Often people will, when they're thinking small caps, will think maybe the not so safe potential 10-bagger specky stocks. But tell us what we should be what we should know about the safe end of the small cap market.
Yeah, well, I think to consider the safe end, it's good to think about the unsafe end. When people think of small caps, they always think about the stock that went up 3 times last week, and perhaps next week it will halve again, and that attracts a lot of the attention. But what's hidden in the small cap sector? There are many really good companies. They may not be the largest that you see on the Australian Stock Exchange, but in their industry or segment, they're dominant. So that's what we call the safe end of small caps, where there are companies, they may again not be the largest you see on the ASX, but in terms of their industry segment, they might be a number one or a number two. An example is the company Catapult. It's relatively small. It's a $400 million market cap, which in stock market terms is quite small, and yet it's number one in its segment globally. And we see that in a whole series of places. In the past, we've made very good money in a company called Temple & Webster that everybody knows now. But when we first invested, they didn't know it, and yet that was a company that had a dominant position, in online homewares. So that's what we mean by the safe end of small caps. Looking for these companies that got assets that are difficult to replicate, got sticky customers, and attractively priced, so you can do well over time, and you can sleep at night as well.
I'm interested to pick up on that Temple and Webster piece and bring it back to the assets that are difficult to replicate. What was the fit there that you saw Temple and Webster had over some of its competitors?
Yeah, well, this is like really important, because when you make a lot of money is when the assets that are difficult to replicate, aren't immediately obvious. And the hooks that hold the customer to the business, that create the sticky customer piece, when those hooks are invisible. So when you first look at Temple and Webster, you see just another retailer of homewares and furnishings. But what we saw when we looked deeper is that this is a segment online growing very rapidly. Again, this seems more obvious now, but 3 years ago it wasn't. You see a segment that's growing very, very rapidly, and you see a company that has the number one position within that segment. And the more we talked with the management are literally outstandingly accomplished individuals. And we just saw many things in that business that are really quite unique, and that's been proven as it's continued to grow from strength to strength over the last 3 years.
So Callum, I want to pick up on this concept of these dominant, number one or number two players in their market, but they're still small caps. I like the way you've sort of explained that and conceptualized that. Looking at the market today, are there any examples of companies that are on your watch list or on your portfolio that fit that billing?
Yeah, I mean, there are many. Catapult was a company that I spoke about before, that's in performance, software and hardware, which measures the performance of athletes. That's a very strong business. I spoke before about Temple and Webster. There is another business called Life 360. believe it or not, globally, that's a number one. And other companies we look at in various segments. So yeah, this happens in many places, and this again, what we mean about the quality into small caps. What's hidden is that in our view, by number, there are more companies with really top quality attributes outside the top 100 than there are within it. It's something that's really not well understood, and they're the sorts of companies we look to find and that we invest in. It's been an opportunity we perceived 15 years ago when we started the fund, and it still exists today.
So, Callum, you also talk about investing in franchise companies. Are you able to explain this concept and perhaps give us some examples of franchise companies that you're interested in at the moment?
Yeah, sure. When we started the fund, we spent many years explaining to potential investors that, thankfully many became investors, what a franchise was. So when we talk about a business franchise, we don't just mean what people think about with respect to, McDonald's or something of that nature. What a franchise means is a company that has an economic moat around it. And by that, we mean it has certain attributes or capabilities that mean it's hard for competitors to come in and steal the revenues. So, it can be a brand, it can be a, superior technological capability, it can be, physical infrastructure like a toll road, but it's something that makes it difficult for competitors to come in and take the company's revenues. That's what a franchise is, and it's just simply a better company than the norm.
So Callum, looking on your website, I believe one of those companies, one of the companies that fits the franchise bill at the moment in Australia is Chic. This is a company that Bryce is a big fan of.
Okay.
He has a knack of picking retail stocks, and he picked this one early. So can you tell us a little bit about the company for those that may not be familiar with it, and why you think it fits the billing as a franchise company?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great example because, on face value, you'd say City Chic, fashion retailer, end of story, a business like many others. And, I must say that was our impression until we really sort of, got under the covers and learned a lot more about the business. So what you need to understand is they work in the plus size segment, and they have an expertise in that area. So they just simply have skills in creating, products for their customers that their customers want to buy. They have an incredible affinity. Their customers, they understand what they want, what they need, what products make them feel good, and they just have an incredible capability in that area, which really comes from the fact they just understand their customers incredibly well and just deliver in accordance with their expectations. So, the customers, they make it feel like you're more part of a club than you're just simply a customer buying their products. And it really just comes from an outstanding management team led by an incredibly capable CEO, and a tremendous culture that really comes from that. And what's been really interesting is they've been able to build a very loyal clientele in plus size customers here in Australia, and that strength and capability has been proven by the fact they've been able to export that offshore. So they're now in the US, they're now in the UK, and they've made acquisitions there, and really add a lot of value to those businesses. So the assets that are difficult to replicate are the knowledge of customer, the ability to produce products those customers want, the ability to make the customers really feel valued. Um, and what makes the customer sticky is because they're just simply responding to when they go to City Chic, they get what they want, and they feel valued, and that makes the customer feel very sticky. So that's a classic example of something on face value doesn't look like a franchise, but but it is.
Yeah, great company. I do love City Chic. So, Callum, to close out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you recently held a conference with a number of CEOs who were all discussing some of the insights that they took from managing their businesses through COVID, and how they sort of think about their businesses into the future. Are you able to share with us some of the key insights from that?
Yeah, look, really happy to do that. Where that came from is, we're obviously continually trying to create an edge, ourselves and how we're looking at companies. And what we just asked management is, what have you learned in COVID that will make you better at your job over the next 5 years? And we thought some quite fascinating range of responses, but maybe I'll just very briefly hit on two or three. The first one is almost like CO 101, but 101, but it's interesting how crises create a refocus on the fundamentals. What many of our top CEOs said is that COVID really made them reflect that you need to devolve your decision making. And what they realised when the crisis hit, they were sort of in there in the weeds with their managers, spending time on fixing the problems. And what they realised with the complexity of COVID, it really wasn't possible. So they've spent a lot of time stepping back and making sure that they're devolving the decision making, but rather than invest the time on fixing the problem, they're investing their time in setting an appropriate set of parameters for their direct reports to work within, and then working very hard to hold them accountable to what the report said they were going to do. Again, this is CEO one-on-one, but it's just really got them focused on devolving responsibility and keeping their eye on the big picture. And that was actually the response we got most, which sort of surprised us. But I think it's made us better as investors because that is an aspect of investment we're now even more focused on than before when we're talking to CEOs. Another one we saw was just really the issue of attitude. We saw one company that in an industry that actually was quite difficult, they absolutely streeted the field during COVID. And it really just came from the attitude of the CEO. He said that they decided, which meant he decided on day one, that no one on the exec team would ever come to the table using COVID as an excuse. Every COVID issues, there would be problems, but they'd be brought to the exec table, always with solutions, and they'd just get on and fix the problem. Now, again, that sounds very simple, but from the power of that one thought, we saw that as a very positive, proactive company that really got out there. And during COVID, they really increased their market share. So when market conditions improved, the company was able to really go well. And they were just sort of a couple of things we saw. And the third one is someone was talking about hiring policy. They say when we're obviously investing in growth companies, many of them that have global capabilities and aspirations, growth paths, and they're just sort of talking about the people they noticed that really perform their organisation. They had a mix of entrepreneurial spirit, operational excellence, and the ability to what they call it the scale gene, the ability to really grow these companies. And so, that was the other thing they were saying with respect to hiring. That's what they've really refocused their attention on. So when we're talking with CEOs, we're looking for those same things ourselves. So all of these things we, I wouldn't say they're things we hadn't known before, but they really just got us focused on what was important. We think as, those things are going to make them better CEOs over the next 5 years. We'd like to think our focus on those issues will make us better investors.
I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that conference. It sounds like there would have been some pretty fascinating insights coming from CEOs. So thank you for sharing. But we have unfortunately run out of time here this afternoon. But thank you very much for sharing yours with us, and all the best with ICE. And we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
No worries. And that brings us to the end of Equity Mates on AusBiz and the end of our week here at Equity Mates. We'll be back next week with our final week to close out 2021, Ren.
That's it. It's exciting. We've got another long form interview to close it out with a returning favourite, Roger Montgomery. So join us next week for our final week on AusBiz. AusBiz will still be running. We'll just be on the golf course. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you same time, same place next week.